Have you considered that anywhere up to 99% of your wedding photos will feature your gorgeous face? So while your venue choice is important and your outfit and flowers can add real impact, if your hair and makeup are important to you, it's time to make them a priority. Gaetana Marjas is an experienced, trusted and sought after hair and makeup artist based here in Adelaide, South Australia. And today she is delivering a must-listen wedding makeup masterclass just for you. I wanted to chat with her for about 3/4 of an hour. And with what we talked about, her input, it turned into a 2-hour long wedding beauty sermon. So I've split it up for you. And in part one, part two, of course, will be released next week. But in part one, today, in this episode, you will learn Gaetana's recommended timing for beauty and skincare treatments leading up to your wedding, really important. How to address your specific skin type concerns, common mistakes that people make with their wedding makeup, and why, if it's at all possible, she recommends that you do a makeup trial. It's also important for me to let you know that Gaetana's advice is, of course, subjective and relates to her ability to do her job to the best of her ability. So when she's mentioning lash extensions this week and next week, she talks about dupe products, it's her opinion. And there is no hate on anyone who thinks or operates their business differently. Gaetana is not interested in creating clickbait controversy or ruffling anyone's feathers. And from a safety perspective, here in Australia at least, and if you reside elsewhere, please do your research. But here in Australia only, medical doctors, dentists and nurses with appropriate training and qualifications are even permitted to administer injectable treatments. So if you're considering undertaking injectable treatments, Gaetana implores you to please seek qualified, professional and independent advice before you make your final decision. There is so much to learn in this episode. Let's get stuck into it. Unbridely is a community of pro-wedding vendors who believe in freedom and integrity in weddings, giving you options, solutions, tips and tricks to create the experience and memories that you and your fiancé really want and deserve. Because we believe that weddings are a team sport. With how-tos, stories and interviews with recently married couples, we find out what went right and what they'd change if they could go back and do it all over again. I'm Camille and welcome to the Unbridely podcast. Hi Gaetana, thank you for taking a moment to chat.
Thank you for having me. It was nice to finally see you face to face.
Yeah, we were just saying before we pressed record, not only that I've stuffed up press and record in the past and we weren't going to do it today, but that we actually haven't met face to face, even though we've been working in parallel.
I know. It happens a lot with quite a few vendors where when you finally do meet them, you feel like you already know them.
Yeah.
And I feel like I know your name. I know all about you. I know the work you do. I might even know what you look like, but I've never actually spoken to you, heard your voice. So it's lovely to finally do this.
It's delightful to finally meet you because I know a lot about you, but maybe our listener doesn't. And so could you please share, Gaetana, with our listener who you are, where you've come from, what you do?
Yes, so my name's Gaetana Marjas. I've got an Italian background. That's where Gaetana comes from. Marjas is my husband's surname. He's Croatian Serbian, but the surname is Slovakian. So people always see my name and just they don't know where have I come from. But I was born at the Queen Liz at Woodville, so, from Adelaide. And I have a background, as you know, in law. So I started as a lawyer in 2001, and I was 22 and worked in the industry full-time until I had my first daughter and then continued on part-time until about sort of 2014. I had an admin working at a firm that I worked at who was doing a makeup course, Christine Carboni. And she was doing makeup and coming to work, and she's very beautiful. So she came to work every day looking gorgeous. And I thought, makeup, what are you doing, Christine? She's like, oh, I'm doing this course. I'm like, I'd love to do that. And that's it. It wasn't ever on the radar that I was going to give up my legal career to go and become a makeup artist, hairstylist, and specialize in bridal. People think that's funny. So didn't you have a plan? I was like, there was no plan. There really was no plan. After about 3 years of trying to keep my feet in both camps, doing law and makeup, my husband actually called me out. I said, I think you're doing a bit too much here. And I think you need to make a call on whether you want to pursue the law or put all your efforts into the makeup and hair, because I was getting very busy by then.
Yeah.
I was working 7 days a week, He said, what do you feel? And I said, well, leading the law was difficult because, like a lot of careers, you identify with the work that you do so closely and it becomes so much of who you are. And I thought giving up the makeup business, that just horrified me. I thought, I can't give up this business. I love this business. I love working for myself. I love the work that I'm doing, the people I'm working with. And I was in insurance litigations. I was catching people on the down. I was working as a lawyer in a very negative, adversarial, nasty side of life. Then I specialised in catastrophic injuries. I worked with people with spinal cord injury and acquired brain injury.
Wow.
People who, really had seen the worst that injuries have to offer us as human beings. And to go from that to weddings, and then people say, oh, but aren't weddings just so stressful? And
in a different
way.
Well,
look, they do have, look, there is stress in this industry. We all know that, but it's a different kind of stress, and it's stress that I was very happy to take on compared to a lot of the stress associated with being a solicitor and barrister.
Wow.
So then 2017 is when I made the actual switch and went full into makeup and hair.
If someone wrote a screenplay about a lawyer who becomes a makeup artist, it'd be thrown out because people go, well, that's a ridiculous concept.
Well, it does sound ridiculous when I tell people, because it's been a few years now since I've done the law. So there was a time when I was a makeup artist, when I was still a lawyer, I was practicing at the same time.
Yeah.
And people thought that was hilarious. And I thought after a passage of time, it'd be less funny or less unbelievable. But even now, people might know someone who knows me. It's Adelaide. I know someone who knows you from your former life. And I heard you were a lawyer, and they just still can't make sense of it. And so, no, it's true. It's not just a fable.
It's an urban myth. But I just think it's wonderful. I think it's truly wonderful, Gaetana, because I think, well, you can tell me, but it looks like you've lived two very different lives.
It does feel like that. And there's a lot of crossover as well. People think that it's just switching one dial off and switching on another. But a lot of lawyers, friends of mine, have become their brides. And they were the first supporters. When I was still working in the office, they'd say to me, oh, I've got a gala ball tonight. Can you bring your kid in the morning and do my makeup before we start work? And we're literally doing makeup in my office. They were buying lashes off me. Can I buy some lashes? So, people think that as lawyers being very serious people, and they are, and it's a very serious job. But they were great supporters, and a lot of them thought it was fantastic that I was doing something else, because a lot of people feel trapped in careers and, like, nice to have a creative outlet. And they were so happy to see me find mine. And I inspired some others to do the same, which was great.
Yes. And another reason why I had to get you to tell your story, Gaetana, because I know that you will inspire many listeners out there as well. So, come here for, wedding planning, but stay for the transformational life advice.
I'm happy to tell anyone who'll listen. Go with your gut.
Yes.
Maybe you don't just jump out of one thing to another, but, follow your heart. And I was always an artist when I was younger. This is not new to me. I come from a long line of creative people and people who work in the service industry in beauty. My dad's a hairdresser. My sister's a beauty therapist. My other sister is a hairdresser. For me, going into law was a very black sheep of me. I was doing something against what everyone else in my family had ever done. So in many ways, I felt like coming into makeup and hair was kind of coming home.
Come back to the family business.
Come back to the family.
I love that, Gaetana. And you've been raking in the awards ever since. That's the short story. But what we want to do is we want to pick your brain, Gaetana, because we have, of course, a lot of engaged couples who listen to the Unbridely podcast. And while a lot of people will plan a party, they'll have food and drink, they'll have entertainment, They'll have things like that. When it comes to hair and makeup, it's a big, scary mystery to a lot of people because everyone knows that photography, wedding photography, it changes how you look. In everyday life, you don't look the same like right here, right now as you do in a photograph. And so we want to know how to transform ourselves. And, you're our magician there.
Yes.
And so if we could start with, Gaetana, what are the most important steps that people should take in their skincare routine in the months leading up to their wedding day?
Well, there's a long list of what you can do, and maybe what you should do, maybe what you will do. Maybe there's 3 lists because a lot of my clients come from a background where they may not wear a lot of makeup, and then they almost may not do a lot with their skin routine generally. And I think in a post-COVID world, the last 4 or so years, people have really not stopped wearing makeup day to day, but a lot of them have minimized it because maybe they don't work in the office all the time or they're not always out and about. They do a lot of work from home. Maybe people have fallen out of routine or just also the trend has changed towards more about skincare than makeup in general and more about getting great skin as opposed to look at this new blush or, this technique I've learned with makeup. And so the few things to consider, it has to be tailor-made to your skin. Not just your skin, but also what your concerns are. And that can be quite subjective. I've had people come in to me and say, oh, my skin is just so horrible. And I think, you look bloody perfect. I don't know what you're talking about. They're like, oh, I've got this little mark and it's the smallest thing. And I'm like, wow. And you have to be respectful and say, okay, look, I understand. You don't want to minimize it and say, oh, that's nothing. When really it is probably, in the grand scheme of things, probably nothing. The main areas people have concerns about are texture, oiliness, dryness, combinations of both, pigmentation, blemishes, so your pimples and the like. Sometimes you have other things like rosacea and other actual skin conditions going on that they would have to look at getting a dermatologist involved to see if there's anything that they can do specifically for them. But when it comes to texture, it's a 3D problem. And with makeup, we're trying to address it with a 2D solution. And so people say, oh, can you make my skin look smoother? And there's only so much we can do on the wedding day to do that. So it's all about the prep beforehand because we can't just put a wash of moisturizer, primer, foundation, concealer, powder, setting spray and hope it just goes away. It'll minimize it, but there is an element of what do we have to do in the groundwork? And we're talking about 6 to 12 months beforehand. So with texture, I would suggest, look, find a great esthetician, great dermatologist, beauty therapist, whoever it is, someone who's really skilled in knowing how to address what your concerns are. So for texture, if you've got sort of bumpiness, just a bit rough, the skin doesn't feel smooth, you might look at microdermabrasion. You might look at skin peels. I mean, these are quite extreme things, skin peels, chemical peels. Not everyone needs them. I don't go out and advocate and say everyone must go and do this 10-step program before they come and see me.
Yeah.
I'm not that kind of artist and I'm not in the business of telling people what to do. But if someone says, look, I've got these concerns and they are a realist, that makeup isn't going to necessarily fix everything, so they really want to work from the ground up, then you're looking at texture, looking at microderms, peels, laser, pigmentation, the same thing. Usually it's laser. There are creams and things that can profess to get rid of pigmentation, but in my experience, I've got freckles. When I was getting married in 2006, I wanted to get rid of all my freckles. Now, we're talking about 18 years ago where freckles were nowhere.
Yeah.
No magazine, no Vogue cover had someone with freckles. It was a very different time. People look at it now and say, oh, it's so cute. Freckles, so cute. What are you talking about? People are getting them tattooed on. I found that very offensive. Like, what are you doing? I spent good money getting rid of them. They're only